the whole religious giving landscape is shifting, and we need to have some handle around this, right? I want to start with a study done by the Lake Institute for Faith and Giving. This is the National Study of Congregations' Economic Practices. It is a nationally representative study of all kinds of congregations, big, small, rural, urban, suburban, runs the whole gamut. The study found that an awful lot of churches are not teaching about giving, helping people grow their capacity to understand giving, for thinking about scriptures that talk about what giving looks like. Awful lot of us have a lot of room to grow. You'll see here that 43% of churches teach about giving once a year or less. So this to point out that there are absolutely opportunities to grow in this area. If the definition that going back to that definition, if generosity is a learned behavior, how do we expect people to learn if we're not teaching it? Where are they learning? If they don't have a family who models that for them, where would they learn? Do we not want our churches to be a place where people can learn about generosity, about giving? Also, it's important to point out that almost all churches in worship ask people to give. So we ask people to give once a week at least, but look at how infrequently we teach about giving. So there is this disconnect, right? And I want you to see this not as a doom and gloom that so few churches teach about giving, but as opportunities. In what ways can you incorporate teaching scripturally based through the lens of faith from the youngest to the oldest? There are opportunities right there for all of us who are leading in churches to do better in this area. Okay, thinking not so much about just the church category here, but all of the charitable giving happening across the United States. This is from Giving USA 2025 report, so hot off the press, released in the summer. This is showing the statistics and data around what is happening in the philanthropy world, people's giving to different kinds of organization in the year 2024. There's a lot of it. $592.5 billion given to charity in 2024. That's a huge sector of the economy. That is actually roughly what Americans spend at the grocery store. Giving is huge. And you see here that religion gets the biggest slice of the pie, right? And the way this study defines religion is actually narrowly defined. Houses of worship, denominations, and religious publishing. It is not faith-based nonprofits are not part of that religion sector. Faith-based nonprofits like World Vision, for example, is under one of the other sectors. So religion is specific to houses of worship, denominations, and religious publishing. So almost a quarter of giving goes to houses of worship. But as you know, you're probably not yourself getting anywhere close to that total. There are lots of houses of worship, and yet that is still core to what giving looks like across the country. So religion is still the biggest recipient of people's philanthropy dollars. This is just to show you some of the trends of what's happening over the last 40 years. The trend of giving keeps growing. That pie keeps expanding, even adjusted for inflation. However, that being said, giving to religious organizations has been declining as a share of total giving to recipient organizations since the 5-year period beginning in 1982, when it represented 58% of the total giving, right? And do you see that shrinking over time down to, from 2024, it has shrunk to 25% of charitable giving that goes to religion. So the share total that's given to religion has continued to decline, even though it is still the biggest recipient of people's philanthropy dollars, declining as a share of total giving. And here you'll see that the percentage adjusted for inflation, religion is the only sector in 2024 that experienced a decline in giving. The percentage on average people are giving has held incredibly flat. For those of you who are formed deeply about the 10% tithing thing, you may be kind of disappointed to see this, because what do you see here? Giving has held over the years at around 2%. of what people have after taxes, all right? We're nowhere close to 10%, y'all. So 2% is what people are giving, and it's stayed pretty flat over the years, okay? Now, people's income have grown definitely over the years, and higher financial capacity givers have been giving more for sure. And that's how that pie has continued to grow over time in terms of people still giving to charity, right? But in terms of the percentage of personal income, disposable income, it stayed pretty flat at about 2%. All right. In fact, there's been a serious contraction in how many US households are giving to any charitable institutions. This is the part that I think is quite disturbing. So we peaked around 2001 with 68% of households giving to an organized charitable institutions, and it has plummeted over the years, and we are now at less than 50% of US household giving financially to any charity. Less than 50% of US household give anything at all to charity, okay? This data does not encompass person-to-person giving. Like if you have a friend and you give to the friend because you're just helping them out because they're in financial difficulty, you're trying to help them, whether it's feeding their kids for their children's whatever help. It doesn't account that. This is just giving to organized institutions. So I want to point that out, but it has dropped to less than 50% of US household giving anything to charity. And thinking about households giving to religion specifically, you'll see that just under 30% of US household give to religion. Now, this is the whole kit and caboodle, okay? This is everybody, and certainly not everybody is a part of a house of faith. So those people who are not a part of a house of worship are much less likely to give. But thinking about what giving looks like, it is not as if everyone in town is giving to some other church other than yours. So I don't want you to think, oh, people giving to other churches, they're not giving to me, to my church. There are a lot of opportunities to connect with folks who are not being connected with, to find any kind of place to practice financial generosity through an institution. But I do want to highlight, looking at a national sample, what the median annual gifts to religion looks like and what the average looks like. So median is the middle, right? So what's this saying is half of people are giving less than 1,000 per year and half are giving more than 1,000 a year, right? And then when you look at the average, which takes all the giving and you divide it by the number of givers, that means we have a lot of people giving really small gifts and a lot of people giving really large gifts, is what the math says to me here. And this whole religiosity, I think, is no news to any of you. Church membership among US adults has dipped below 50%. We mentioned that not everybody is in churches or houses of faith. That number has dropped below 50% of US individuals being part of houses of faith. That, of course, affects people's formation for generosity. We just named that family and church are big places we learn to be generous. If people are not a part of churches and lots of households are not giving to charitable institutions, this helps to start to explain some of those big trends. I don't want to be a total downer here. It's not what my goal is. I would say that I would, in fact, challenge us to see this as a big opportunity. We have a chance to help people discover the joy of giving. If indeed practicing generosity is in people's enlightened self-interest to practice, we want people to experience that. And there are a lot of folks who haven't had that opportunity. One piece that is also really important for how we as people leading in congregations can think about this is that we live in a time of such incredible low trust. And that, of course, affects how people give. The generally low level of trust is hindering a lot of generosity. You can't really give to a place you don't trust to steward your gift well, right? You're not going to give to places that you have you have very low trust in. And look at this here, recent research, just under 40% of people think that nonprofit organization will mostly do the right thing. That's pretty low. And then it falls. It drops to under 30% believe that religious organizations will generally do the right thing. And then around 20% who don't believe that other people will generally do the right thing. This is really an unusually low for how people generally express trust. There are certainly some larger cultural movements around community building, the fabric of our society, that we all want to be part of some solutions here. But at the individual level within our own congregation, my question to you is, how is it that you're fostering trust within your congregation? How do you build trust intentionally, not just because we're people of faith? Therefore, trust us, right? We all have experienced, we all have had, our culture has had a terrible experience for leaders, especially spiritual leaders who have given us a bad reputation, who have cheated people of their money even. So there's a lot of work here that needs to be done of how we can demonstrate lots of clarity within our congregation, reliability over time. In fact, I contend that we have to do that work a lot more than previous generations. And that's a piece we as leaders can be a part of.